We've just filled the water barrel. We're going to check over this Johnson 4 horsepower. This is going to be the first start since last summer. So let's run it up and see how it performs. So now we're in position. Let's start it up. So as you can hear in the background, it's running. It took a little going to start with. That was primarily because last time it was run, we ran it completely out of fuel. As you can hear, it runs up absolutely fine. You can see it's spitting water out of the exhaust, and that's how you tell. Of course, it will be a little bit smoky at the moment. That's primarily, as you say, it's just old fuel, and you can see a bit of the fuel. I run it very rich with the oil, but that's nothing to worry about. It's idling over absolutely fine, so let's just do a quick walk around with it. So now if we stop it, and then we will give it a couple of just pulls to show that it starts up very easily before we start it in gear. So there you have it. This is the Johnson 4 horsepower. It's a twin cylinder motor. It is very good. It's in very good condition, completely reliable. It's undergone a recent overhaul. What we've done is, if we look down here, we've replaced the fuel shutoff and choke valve, and also the idle valve. That whole mechanism was broken, but the whole thing's been replaced. The good thing about these motors is this repair was done last year, and everything is still available and easily available, all the parts, so they're very easy to maintain. Okay, so good morning. It's actually about 3 o'clock in the morning. For some reason I couldn't sleep. I realised when I advertised the motor behind me for sale. It's a bit of an older motor, and although it was clearly spitting water out of the vents here, probably for someone to buy it, they'd want to see that it has actually had an impeller change, or at least the condition of the impeller done. What I'll do now is I'll just strip the leg down, we can have a look at it, and I'll change it if necessary. Let's get going. The first thing to do is just make sure it's tight on the stand. We don't want this dropping off. Little catch underneath, and it should lift up one way or the other. There we go. So I don't know how easy it is to see here, but on these it seems very, very easy. You can see here, this is your main gearbox housing, and I think just here along this seam there'll be a couple of bolts, 2 at the back, and obviously an exhaust and a water inlet here, and the impeller will sit just in there. So let's have a look at taking that off. So you can actually see when you get close to the bolts, the paint is removed, so this has obviously been done in the past, but it's always good to check it. Second bolt. Let's see, will this just come apart? Yeah. And as you can see, this here is the water pump housing. That came apart very, very easily. That's your shift linkage, just there. And obviously your drive shaft. What we'll do, we'll put some grease on the end of the drive shaft again just to make sure it's all good. And that there, if you can see it, maybe a bit hard to see it, but that is the impeller, and that is fine. So if we have a quick look now, you can see I've taken the main gearbox case off. I wanted to check what condition the oil was in. It was dirty, you can see it just coming down the side here. It certainly was dirty, but it wasn't emulsified. That's key, because that means all the seals around the prop are fine. It's not letting water into the gearbox case, so that's really good. If we have a look at the drive shaft, I've just cleaned that up now. I'll clean it up a bit more and I'll just grease the end. I'm going to put a new O-ring seal on just here. I don't know if it's very easy to see, but there's an O-ring seal that just goes here. There you go. So I'll put a new one of those on and grease the end. As you can see, this is the impeller. The plate, the water pump housing is going to go on next. So that's peace of mind, the impeller's good. One second thing to note, what I always do is I just get a bit of grease on the end of my finger and I just, on a new blade, there, I put put a blob of grease on. That way, when it spins for the first time, it doesn't take the tips of the impeller off. Here you can see that the water pump housing is back on. I've done the bolts just hand tight, I haven't ratcheted them up. This is a plastic, this is important to note actually. A lot of people will try and use a ratchet. I'm not, just using a screwdriver, and it's just a little tighter. And that means you don't crack. Oh, where are we? There we are. That means you don't crack your water pump housing. So far we've had a new impeller fully put on. As you can see, it's in gear, it turns clockwise, and you can see the prop shaft moving, fully in place. So now we need to refill the gear oil and put the leg back in place. So it's quite hard to film at the same time as actually doing this. However, you can see I've put the gearbox cover back on now, and I've opened up the two holes here, and oh, you can just see it down there. What that's going to do is allow me to fill it from the bottom up when I've got the leg reattached. So I've just nipped up the bolts. I haven't torqued them right up. The trouble is with doing that is when it comes to renewing seals, you can strip the bolts trying to get them off. So you just do it just enough. So now it's to put the prop and the casing back on, which we'll probably do that actually once we've got the leg reattached. Okay, so the final job to do with this is very quick and easy. The gearbox is in, it works as it should. I'll demonstrate that afterwards, just as a final. Gear oil just to go in the bottom till it comes out the top, and then we just use the two drain plugs to seal it back up. So as you can see, we've got oil coming out of the top hole and the bottom hole. So just nip those up. And give it all a rub down. So finally, just to make sure, the prop shouldn't, when you turn it over, the prop doesn't spin, and when you put it in gear, it does. And back. So there we have one fully serviced Johnson 4 horsepower. Spark plugs, gearbox oil, impeller, and it works. It runs up, goes in and out of gear. It is perfect. Very, very good condition.